And welcome to Habs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Blaine Pudvey. I'm joined by my co-host, Treg Wilson.
How you doing?
And we are joined by a special guest, Terry Ryan. Thanks for coming on, Terry.
Thanks for having me, guys. And once again, I appreciate the invite as always. Just took me a little bit to get around to it. I'm so busy.
Well, we understand how busy it is up in Newfoundland right now with you guys being getting shut down because of COVID. So we totally get it.
Got my daughter here with me. We've been relatively, I won't say unscathed, when all this started, being roughly a year ago. We took all the precautions as everywhere else, but there was really no COVID. We had one breakout at a funeral home last May, and that was 44 cases, and everybody stayed in and pretty much took care of it. Outside of the odd, we have transitional workers, but we had a few people get it while say working on the rigs in Alberta, but they'd come back and be in isolation. So we really didn't have anything out in the open. I'm not sure what happened a few days ago, but a couple of clusters broke out, and now they just shut down everything. I work part-time at a bar, TJ's, that's shut down. My daughter's school, pretty much everything. So I guess this is how long it took, but the reality of COVID, if you can believe it, I mean, outside of seeing it on TV, hasn't really hit here like it has literally today. Today, we found 100 new cases, I think, so it's blown up now.
Well, I'm not glad it happened, but I'm glad that you guys have been pretty well protected up on the Rock. Treg and I are both sailors, so we have an affinity for St. John's and Newfoundland. So we would hate to see anything bad happen up there to such great people. So
George Street's like our second home when we go there. So
love it, guys. I'm down there too, and I'm helping run my buddy's place, TJ's Pub, and it's been a breath of fresh air in all this, right? Because you know what's happening, you see what's happening on TV, you hear stories, people living away, but there really was no reason to be threatened. We had, again, it's half capacity. Everybody wears a mask. I'm certainly not saying we're taking it lightly, but yeah, George Street's a laugh. We had no George Street Festival this year, and it's not just I say that on my podcast sometimes, and I get shit. People are like, incidents of you're being just about a beer. I'm like, no, it's the like anywhere. I'm not saying we're unique to it, but George Street and George Street Festival is time that everybody comes together, and the fishermen, the hockey players, the musicians, the tourists. It's a laugh, and that's what it's not so much when we explain here in Newfoundland what we miss. It all involves drinking, so it sounds like we all miss drinking, but I mean, there's alcohol in houses. We miss the whole. I guess it's the Irish, Scottish, English in us. The whole pub atmosphere, hanging out, listening to live music, and telling stories for the most part.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've been up to George Street for the festival a few times, and I've done the Calgary Stampede. I've done festivals around the world, and George Street blows everything out of the water. You got music in the streets, music in the restaurants and the pubs, and everyone's dancing and singing and laughing with each other, and complete strangers. It's just so much fun.
Every year, that's been a big part of my life. That because of that atmosphere, and because in Canada, but especially in Newfoundland, you want to visit in the summer. So since I've been living away, I'm 43, 44 now. 30 years ago, 14. That's when I moved, and since then, every single year, I have. People choose that time to come. So George Street Festival for me is also a real reunion with people I haven't seen in a long time. I'm really fortunate. Growing up, I thought Newfoundland was so far off the beaten path, and no one would ever come. And I went away to Quesnel and then Tri-Cities and Montreal. I'm thinking, none of these guys are ever gonna know where I'm from. But it's great because post, pro hockey and all that, and I still travel a lot. But it's somewhere now people like to come, and that's one of the reasons is George Street Festival. So I miss it.
segueing into that, I have a question. How does a small town Newfoundland boy end up playing West Coast hockey for his junior career? Like, how did that end up?
Well, there wasn't much scouting here at the time, and I was doing really well though. John Slaney's 4 or 5 years older than me. He scored the big goal for Canada there in the junior in Saskatoon, the World Juniors, arguably the biggest goal at the World Juniors ever. It's certainly in the top 10. But I mean, he won this. I remember John was big in bantam here. We all knew it, and I remember like who he was. But they won to get to go to Toronto, I think, to play the SO Cup. It was at the time, maybe the Air Canada Cup, something like that. And that's where he got scouted. Point is, no one was coming here. So I came a few years after him, and I ripped it up. We won the provincials 16-0. I think I had 8. It was comical. It was laughable. And we went to the Quebec Pee Wee tournament. And that's a huge, one of the biggest minor hockey tournaments in the world, if not the biggest. At the time, it was definitely the biggest. And we did all right, but I was scoring a lot. All of a sudden, I was on an international stage. I never really I was here doing that. We had a bit of an inferiority complex here in Newfoundland at the time that I was coming of age. No one, we just, right now, even like things like Republic of Doyle blew the roof off, the film industry. And then Great Big Sea came along with music and the St. John's Maple Leafs and John Slaney and all that. But none of that had happened like when I was 10, 11, 12, 13. It was until, I was 14. So like all that was just starting. I never thought I could get 100 goals here. Actually, I did. I think I had like 400 goals, but I never thought there was ever a chance. Everybody on the mainland is going to crush Newfoundland. Like I've often said, I played soccer, ball hockey, baseball, hockey in a national level before I was 14 years old. We would win here. We would go, and we always played the host first game. So the host would beat us 7-1. Everybody got a free hot dog, and everybody's happy. And the Newfoundlanders gave it a good effort, And it's just that's the way I thought of it. So in my mind, every single player on like a Toronto team would be better than me. So we went there, and that started. Then I realized, okay, like I'm scoring against the Toronto Red Wings, and Mount Pearl is tying them 5-5. Terry had 5. So there was that. Now there was a guy there with the Vancouver Super Series, and he wanted me to play on this team, Vancouver, and that was for bantams. At the time, I was Pee Wee. He wanted me to go out. At least this particular player wanted. It was actually a tournament for Pee Wee through midget, but this guy wanted me to go play with the bantam team in Vancouver. So I came home and told my father that. And my dad, knowing, my dad played pro hockey too, so he was no slouch. He knew about that world, and he knew that I had to go soon. I didn't really take him seriously when he used to say that. But so what my dad said, he said, rather than you go play with them, we'll make a team Newfoundland. And because, all these guys need to be scouted. There was no AAA system here then. A really weak one, went to like 2 tournaments a year. It was only in midget. So that was it. So we got a team together, and a long story short, we opened up against Vancouver like you would, right? Play the host. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sun God Arena, first game 6-6, and they had like some real good players. And then with the team BC we played, we lost 6-5, and then we lost 6-5 Northern Alberta, Southern Alberta, same score. Ryan Smith, we're talking Chris Dingman, Brad Lukowicz, Damon Lankow, Ray Schultz, like Jason Podolin, Michael Clark. I can go down. Like all these guys were at the tournament, so we're doing all right. I'm playing a year above me. I'm a 77. I'm playing with the 76s. So I get most promising player of the tournament. We never won a game, but we lost 3 by a goal, and we tied 2. The last game, we lost 10-1 to Manitoba, and we put it up first game. I swear to you, different era. But we said the scouts are here, and they loved it then. It was Western League in the 90s. And we only went out there with 12 players, and we had a line brawl first shift. They kicked our ass, but we figured we did our job, which we did. Now, Dad was right. I was the highest profile out of that, but Kurt Walsh also played on our team, never would have gone anywhere. He went to Ontario, had a successful 4-year run. I believe won a CIS championship, and he was also drafted 3rd round to Buffalo. We had Dave Penny, played junior A from that. Oh, God. We had Mike Pittman, played on Jeff O'Neill's line in junior, Guelph. Works in Guelph, married a girl there. I'm forgetting. Oh, and obviously Cleary and Harold Druken, right? So there was none of that was known. So all of a sudden, this team comes back. Tri-City were at this tournament, and they did what they could. They found my dad a job. He was a teacher. They found him a job subbing for the year, and then he helped to coach like minor hockey and stuff. And they had a place to go, Quesnel, and they said if I went out there, they'd draft me. I got it in writing, but whatever legalities like that, you couldn't get all of it in writing. That they were going to draft me, but they said they would, and they gave Dad the job, and they picked me 3rd overall in the Western League draft. I knew nothing about it, and when I went out there, I thought I was going to play. I played Pee Wee here. The next season, not only all that happened, I thought I was going to BC. I didn't know where. They sent me to Quesnel up by Prince George. I had a great time, but middle of nowhere, small town, and love it. But I'm just saying, it wasn't Vancouver. And I played junior. Like I couldn't believe it. And not only that, I'm telling you the story of how I ended up there. But two things I'll add, and these aren't bragging. I'm not saying this bragging. Number one, I can't believe that going 8th overall is one thing. You know, what I take from hockey is the championships I won. But if you ever ask me, you know, on a personal level, what's my biggest, I don't know, going 8th overall, yes, but that's obvious. Leading my junior team in scoring and having 220 penalty minutes as a 14-year-old, a first-year bantam I've never hit before. You know, that to me, looking back, I just can't see. Lots of people go 8th overall. I just can't see, as the game changed, I just can't see anybody doing that anymore. Not that I'm swear to you, I'm not saying this like I'm better than Wayne Gretzky or anything. It didn't really happen that way. It was an era, it was going into this crazy tough era. I was a 14-year-old allowed to wear no visor, no cage, I had a visor. And I was allowed to drop my gloves and fight like 15 times. And, you know, it went right into the Western League. And it was a crazy era. I could ride that wave, and I did. And I'm glad I did, but I just can't see, you know, 14 got younger after that, right? Like a 14-year-old now, I wouldn't even think of it. If I don't know, my daughter's there, bad comparison because there's hitting at the time. And, but you know, I had a stepson. I raised my buddy BJ Young's son, Tyson. He played junior B out in Alberta for the St. Paul Canadiens for a couple of years. I would never have thought about, you know, him. It wouldn't even be possible, but for anybody his age to go out there and start fighting and playing, and you know, it was one thing to go high, but to lead my team. I'm not saying, by the way, that Tyson isn't a great hockey player in his own right. I just mean his age group of all of them. He played AAA here. I watched all of them coming up. It's not purely a talent thing. It's just they all seemed so young to me at 14, you know, like, and I was a fairly big 14-year-old, but looking back, like, wow, you know, that was amazing. You know, I can't believe I found my way in and around and you know, navigated that situation. Because, you know, I'd never, and I'm not just saying on the ice here, I'd never really drank. I mean, you know, I remember having a couple of beers in my buddy's parents' basement thinking we were badass, but, you know, I never went to a party like this and with women there. I'd never been laid before. The first game, actually, I got shit kicked in a fight. The second game, and there is a level of loony to me, I got to say. Like, I went right at their bench. I fought their toughest player. I put hot sauce on my hands and chipped up my helmet so he would hurt his hands when he came at me. And I went on, and I just, in my mind, I was gonna do it. It would take a lot. I would have broken the law, which technically I guess I did. I mean, I rubbed hot sauce all over his hands, kicked the shit out of him. And after the game, lost my virginity. Everything was coming a mile a minute. I was like, I want to do this now. I want to be accepted. I want to play. I want to score. I think in the end, that's why that helped me as a player, that no nonsense, give it to me, I want it now attitude. It hurt me with the Montreal Canadiens because I just didn't give it time. I do think you give a first rounder 100 games to fail. I've always said it. And I don't understand how there was times that I didn't get called up and play more, but it wasn't the end of the world. I do think that if I'd stuck around, I'm a good enough player that I could at least, you know, showed them that I could have played some more games. But I have I'm a catch-22. What got me there, when it came to that, you know, I should have gone back to Montreal camp, and I absolutely loved my time there. And I know that question's probably coming, but I loved Montreal and everything. I had a little problem with Michel Therrien. I wanted to trade, and I acted a bit fast. But anyway, I just answered like 10 questions that you didn't ask in one.
Well, actually, one of my questions was going to be about the story behind any possible trade. I know that you've hinted at it at a bunch of different places. I haven't heard the full story, so I was pretty curious to find out.
Well, guys started, I don't remember exactly when it started to happen, but I didn't like Michel Therrien. I was there at 19, right? Like, I just had a concussion, but they were really treating that with kid gloves, and that was a good thing. But like, I remember Mario Tremblay, I mean, he gave me his number. You know what I mean? Like, so it wasn't always bad with Montreal. I made it when I was 19. I only played 3 games. I get sent back at the deadline, but they wanted me to practice with the team. I'm sure that year I would have gone to the American Hockey League if they could have done it. But as a 19-year-old, you weren't allowed. That rule is always, there's always a little bit of vagueness and foggy area around that rule. But as I understand it, I could not have been sent down to the American League. So I remember Mario Tremblay saying to me, he said, you know, do you want to play? Do you want to stay here? I said, you're going to go back. You got nothing much left to prove other than winning. And he said, we can trade you. We can get you sent back at the deadline. He said, why do you need to be in Tri-City right now? You're going to get more than 50 goals. He said this. He said, you know, you're definitely going to get in fights. He goes, I'd rather you up here and practice with these guys. And then shortly after, Shane Corson got traded to our team. They put me with Darcy Tucker. So there was clearly a plan, right? Like, it's not like there was no plan. But then when Mario left, and at the very beginning, Serge Savard and Jacques Demers drafted me, right? So they really loved me. Like, I only recall being elated whenever I talked to them. And Mr. Demers called me like right off the bat, but I mean, he got fired right away. So then Tremblay came in and he liked me, but then he got fired. Like, this all happened before, like, I really became 20. You know, I just got drafted. And a whole lot of tumultuous situation with the Patrick Waugh trade and everything. That happened. You know, so I was kind of just caught up in this boat that was already sailing along. So the next year, though, right? So I went back to Red Deer, and I had a great I think I'm still in the top 10 playoff scorers ever in a year. I had 18 goals, and we didn't even make the final. I remember leading the WHL in playoff goals, 18 and 16 games, and we were knocked out after 3 rounds. And one of those rounds was a sweep. So do the math. So then in the regular season, in 16 games, I had 35 points. So I had a goal a game or something, 30 odd games, 30 odd goals. So I was pumped, you know, and I didn't get in one fight in Red Deer. They were very adamant, like, you know, I wanted to go back and prove that you can score. And I could. I mean, that was the first thing that I ever wanted to do. I have a temper, and at the time if you could fight, it was rewarded, and I could. It wasn't always temper. In fact, less than half the time, but less than a quarter of the time. You know, I just remember just being so happy and being a Montreal Canadian, and, you know, like a year or 2 of that. And then I went to Fredericton, and I met Michel Therrien. I didn't like him. I could tell you some stories, but just overall, let's just finish this one first. I didn't like the man at all. And a lot of people shared my opinion. It was I'm happy by nature. I'm a jubilant. Anybody in junior, I score a goal. You might get me on that one. If I was ever unsportsmanlike, or you said I had an attitude problem, it was like celebrating after goals. I was elated. Each goal I scored in the Western League, it was like the NHL to me. Like, I used to watch major junior games on TV. Eric Lindros was like big when I was 12, 13, and I just never thought I'd be playing it. So, and Tri-City's this desert place, and they had a lot of fans. They wouldn't always sell out, but close to, and they'd sell out a lot. And, you know, I was one of their main players, and I just was elated to be a hockey player. I never ran into any adversity. If I did, I just told you about it. If it was off the ice, I need to get laid. I need to fit in. What do I got to do? What do I have to do to fit on this team? Fight that guy? I can't beat him. I'll put hot sauce on I would do it. If I needed to be in Tri-City and I thought my name should be out there more, I'd drive down to the weather station, ask them, can I do the weather? Come to see a Tri-City Americans game. That was me. I was just in your face. I never ran into much adversity I couldn't speak or I couldn't take. When I met Michel Therrien, the first time, I got rubbed the wrong way for 3 weeks, and I didn't want to be seen as this first-round pick that's like, you know, complaining, but I couldn't understand him. He called me in his office once for a meeting, and he just lit up a cigarette and smoked it and didn't say anything. He just lit up a cigarette. He stares at me, and I'm waiting for him to say something. And a minute later, I realized this is a mind game, so I'm not going to say anything. And my attitude was, go fuck yourself. My attitude wasn't like, you're going to get the most out of me. My attitude was, when I leave this office, I'm the fuck out of here, and I'm never coming back again. I didn't know what this was. A mind game for no reason. I could see if I fucked up. This was a mind game for no reason. And then I find out that this is part of his shtick. I want no part of it. That's not what I want. And I'm willing to get the hell out of Montreal if I got to. It's my favorite team since I'm a kid. Since I'm born, it's my dad's favorite team. My first picture is in a Montreal Canadiens shirt. with Santa. So, but I'm willing, and I'm telling you, that was one interview that this guy just acted like a jackass, and his method, and again, not all his fault. Mike Keenan was big at the time, you know. I hear Mike Babcock, you know, because I Babcock coached against me in junior, but you know, you hear now looking back, I don't really know. I yet to be. I don't think Mike Babcock was pulling what Michel Therrien was. Point being, no, it was the time to be an authority, like almost a dictator kind of a coach, right? Not everybody was like that, but if it was big, this was the time that it was big, and Michel Therrien decided to go that route. Anyway, there's more and more stories, but you know, and I can tell them after this if you want. But anyway, that's why I wanted out. And then all of a sudden, guys start getting traded that I'm looking around and I'm playing with. I'm not saying I'm better than Darcy Tucker. No way. That's an insult to Darcy Tucker. But I know I played junior against him. And if he can be a star once he gets traded to Tampa, I think I can play on the fourth line somewhere for a chance for 30 games, you know, like, and, you know, oh God, not that I'm as good as these players, but all these players, while I'm there, started to get a chance when they got traded. Craig Conroy, Valerie Bure, Jim Campbell, who no one expected anything from. He goes to St. Louis and was like up for Rookie of the Year or something. Craig Conroy is immediately one of the best two-way players in the league. Brad Brown, eventually, who I'm coming on my podcast tomorrow. He's one of my best buddies. He was down there the whole time with me in Fredericton. The whole time. Couldn't get games. He got called up. The last game he played, he got a shift with 1 second left to fight Rob Ray. We were both in the same situation. Brownie gets traded, 390 games straight in the NHL till he retires. I was down there going, what the hell? Matt Higgins, Aaron Asham, everybody got traded. Actually, those two came right after me, but still, it was part of, you know, and I'm going, what is this? I'm down here. I put in my time, and I went to Mr. Houle. I said, you know, I did everything you wanted me to do. I thought going into my 20 year, seeing that I was here when I was 19, I would be up. I think they either didn't make one of those years, they didn't make the playoffs. I don't know which one it was. And they weren't, it's not like they made the Stanley Cup final the year before. The years I was there were these anomaly years. The year before I got there, I think they won the cup and then they didn't make the playoffs or something. It was the middle of all that too. And like, I'm like, you know, there's a whole, it seemed like within the organization, they didn't know what they were doing. So I just wanted out, and Mr. Houle, I said to him, I'm like, you know, I went down, I was Rookie of the Year, my first year in Fredericton. You know, I didn't even think I'd go down there. I was Rookie of the Year. I had 21 goals, 34 fights. You know how many goon punches I've taken for you guys? I'm just like, please get me out of here. Didn't happen. So then the next year I go back with him again. Our relationship completely deteriorates. But I play another 50 or 55 games. I think I had 45 points. I ended up with more points. Now I'm like, get me out. I just want out. I just want out of here. And I was asking pretty much every day. And I you know, the worst is that at the time, my relationship with, and, you know, I'd get called up in Ellen Vigneault. I don't know what he thought of me, but I mean, I'd go out and get in, for the most part, one shift and I'd fight. But I mean, he's looking at this guy in the minors that's got 34 fights, I guess, in 1 year. And I was doing okay. A lot of it was, you know, junior guys, I dropped my gloves, but I was a middleweight. You know, I was a tough middleweight that could surprise, just like I was in pro. I just wasn't doing it that much. And I wasn't fighting all the goons. Yes, there's stories about me. I fought Wade Belak because I don't give a shit. But like, he wasn't on the menu every night in junior. But when I got into pro, that line was foggy in some games. I remember getting called up one of my last games, going to the rink, in the paper, open it up, kid, right? First round pick, excited to be playing. And it said, in the news and notes part of the Gazette, it said, Terry Ryan's being called up today from Fredericton. And it only mentioned my penalty minutes. And it said a possible opponent for Christophe Oliwa tonight. And I'm like, because he's back from injury or whatever. I'm like, oh, Jesus, like, this is it. This is it. This is what I'm here for. And then Oliwa got scratched, so did I. And I was going, wow. So it's a tough, weird position to be in because I was obviously being rewarded for my fighting. Now, I don't mind doing it, but now I'm thinking to myself, on top of, am I going to make a career out of being an NHL heavyweight? When I'm looking around going, I'm lucky that Ty Domi, these are funny stories, but I'm lucky that him or Bob Probert hasn't knocked me silly so far, right? So I'm always willing to do it, but I wanted to play. And again, it's not like my stats were terrible. It's not like I went down there and all of a sudden I couldn't score. A lot of people say first round bust or whatever, or, you know, about certain players, but it used to burn me because I'm like, I don't know, just put me on the ice somewhere else. I know I'm not a great skater, but everybody said that everywhere I went, and I keep surprising them. You guys pick me. Anyway, I said that to Mr. Hua once, and he said, no, I didn't pick you. I wouldn't have picked you. He didn't say it in a malicious way either. I was asking, you know, please get me out of here again. And he was just like, I wouldn't have picked you. I don't think you're a good enough skater. And he said, you know, you're here, you're an asset. Yeah, he offered me the 10% raise, whatever it was, but he told me I would be, like, he offered me the qualifying deal. He just told me that I would be in Quebec and I would be one of their call-ups and I'd be captain in Quebec City. That was their farm team for 1 or 2 years, the Citadels. So I said no. This was before camp started. So I said, no, I don't want that. Can you please trade me like you traded everybody else? And he didn't. I didn't know. In November, I didn't know what to do. I started calling teams. So I went to Long Beach. I played 1 game. They traded me to Utah, and this is in the IHL. And then 8 games into my stint in Utah, which I was being used as a tough guy, St. John's Maple Leafs phone. It's my hometown. They signed me as a free agent on loan from Montreal. I thought I was getting traded. I know that there was a deal on the table. Bill Waters told me that. He's got no reason to lie. Montreal didn't take it. We both were stubborn. In the end, I should have gone back to camp, like Aaron Asham and those guys. And, you know, eventually I would have just been the team probably would have tried to trade for me. It wouldn't have all been on Montreal's shoulders. And in the end, I think they were stubborn. They didn't get anything out of a first round pick. I don't know how good I would have been, but, you know, I at the very least would have given it my all, put it that way. Like I said, I think you give a first rounder 100 games to fail. I could be wrong. But that being said, guys, that's a story. There's absolutely no hard feelings because everything that just happened, I know that it's part of hockey. And I know in the end, it lies on me. I didn't get a lot, but if there's one person in Montreal that I look at negatively from that time that I totally forgive now because we were both young is Michel Therrien. He was a rookie coach as well, but the whole reason I just didn't want to be around him. You know, I had no problem. I think Reggie could have used me more, Reggie Hull, but I had nothing against him. He's right. He didn't draft me. You know, he was there. There's other teams that would have been interested. I don't hold it against him. And Liam Vigneault was just a really professional guy, seemed really nice, but I didn't really know him that well. You know, I'd get called up and he had a system and players to put soldiers, to carry out that system for him. And I was one of them. I listened to him. Seemed like a really smart guy. I had nothing against him. You know, it was Michel Therrien that I didn't like.
Now, Treg, you had a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think if you did less fighting that you would have more of a chance with your scoring? Because like you said, you kind of did anything you were asked. Do you think if maybe you toned down the fighting that you would have been a different path maybe?
Ironically, yes, for a couple of reasons. And I say ironically because it definitely added to my package. I went 8th overall because that was part of the deal. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was ever leaned towards the fighting, but it certainly helped in the era of the power forward, in the era of we have Vincent Damphus and Saku Koivu. And, no offense against guys like Mick Fakota, who were there, that were there for a little bit, that were probably tougher, let's be honest. Like Mick Fakota is a killer in the NHL. But I thought what I brought to the table is that I got as much spunk. I can fight. I don't think quite as good as that, but nothing against Mick. He's an NHLer, and I got no reason to say this. At the time, though, I thought, you can throw me in on the power play. And when I played exhibition, I scored a couple goals in that. I wasn't like, I know it's exhibition, but I know in my head what I played. I know what I saw. I practiced out there. It was an extension of junior. It was all guys that it was my peers. I never felt that I couldn't play, but fighting was a big part of the game. Here's another point I was going to get to. If ever it came down to it, and I remember it happening. So if we went to play, say, an exhibition game somewhere, or even in the regular season, if it was going to be me or Matt Higgins, say, who's a buddy, or me or Eric Hood, great underrated player that I think they should have used more back then. There's an example, Eric Hood. I didn't think I was any better than him. He came out of nowhere. He went like the 6th or 7th round. But trade me because you got him. You want your French guy. You want your wheels. He's just like I am. except he's, doesn't fight. But anyway, we would get into these situations. I think it was easy to put those guys on the power play and me, say, on the penalty kill and me on the third line. If you're going to put one of those guys on the first line, well, Terry can grind it out. Right now, I had 50 goals in my draft year, which I don't need to name everybody in the organization that was Dangler, but I'm thinking, though I do those things, and though I might not look like a speedster, I definitely didn't look like Jonathan Drouin out there when I was skating, right? Like you look at games, he looks like he's flying sometimes. It certainly wasn't like that. But wherever I went, I was getting the stats. If you put me on the power play, I know I'm a good passer. I always got put with the best player on the team or the number one center, which was Lankow, as my career went on, with BJ Young, Mark Wolf, whatever it might be. So I knew I could do it. And I'm certainly not complaining and saying those guys couldn't grind on but I'm just saying, if you had Rick Nash and Shane Doan, you would probably go, you know what, Doan, we're going to put him on the third or fourth line. That's what I'm saying. Now, have they, if in that particular year, if Doan had more points, I don't really think it could. So there, I looked at that as versatile though, because I didn't really care what line I played on. So I remember that, not every fight was an invested decision, but sometimes it was. Like if we were at the end of the game in junior and pro, or, there's 2 minutes left and it's 6-1. Of course, I often thought pad my stats. It wasn't always for me, my stats. It was send a message. If it's in junior and you're playing Spokane, hey, I can get a fight. Send them a message with 2 seconds left. Every scout here is going to go, this guy's full of piss and vinegar, right? It can't hurt me. And if I do well against a tough guy, that's the other thing. I didn't fight pushovers, especially when I went to pro. I always felt, there's a second part of your question, or this touches on your question. Did I do too much of it? In a way, yes, for that first reason I said. Second reason, my reputation obviously became more and more as time went on. Like there's people now from Newfoundland that look back and say, like there's kids I coach and go, wow, I can't believe that you can play when I go out and play with them. I still play senior, right? I led this, it's a senior league, but I led the league in scoring a couple of years ago, right? It's Newfoundland's got a great senior league. So in other words, I know it's senior, but I can play, like I can skate. Right? But a lot of the kids that I come to, like, because what lasts on YouTube is the fights. And I've got like 80 fights on there. But I'm like, no, I always had stats and I can see how that, I mean, there wouldn't be a whole lot of goals just the way it works. But, well, from the NHL, there would be none. But so anyway, there's that. But fighting, there's a fine line because, guys, if you really want to know, and I've never really, until you just said that, as I digress, I was not only pretty good at it, I was a good fighter to have because I'm a middleweight, like I said. So when I fought Ty Domi, right now it looks back, I did it to impress my high school buddies and everything. No one in the Montreal dressing room, I did it 3 times, but the first time, I'm 18 years old. No one in Montreal dressing room thought I was going to do it. Now, when I did it, it was different than, say, a Mick Vakota doing it. I get nothing against this guy. I love Mick. He ended up playing with me in the minors. I use him as an example because he was a meat and potatoes guy. Now, he scored a bit in junior too. That's it. But I'm saying that Mick was like a real killer. Like for him to fight Ty Domi would have made sense, right? But an 18-year-old coming in that just got drafted in the first round like 2 months ago, right after Domi does the belt and stuff, like with Probert, like it was, look back at that situation, just like the 14-year-old I told you earlier. That's another thing. I went in as a first round pick. It would be like now fighting Ryan Reeves, like just some like young kid that just, again, not a young guy that's 20 or 21, an 18-year-old that just got drafted. Like it was bizarre. So, but when I did it, we got so much of a boost that, so after I fought, a lot of it was a microcosm of that situation. Like we'd go into Philadelphia, if Terry's going to fight Frank Bialowas, and I'd do all right and give it to him. And I was all right. I was learning how to do it. So I knew that, because now, if I went to fight Martin St. Louis and slipped or something, that would do the adverse effect, the exact opposite for the team. But I tended to fight Belak and these guys, and I was all right at it, and I was getting respect from them, and I started to be like accepted in that community, like in the tough guy community. But that's here nor there. But like So I knew when to do it. I got to be honest. I knew when to do it. I just wasn't out there doing it. I wouldn't just accept, if Mark Major or Ryan Vandenbush just asked me to fight, I'm not going to fight. We're winning 4-2, right? But I knew when to do it. I knew if they hit the goalie, and I was an expert at it, right? I came out of the Western League in the 90s. So there was an appeal because, and it's like Aaron Asham when he made it. This is all in relative terms, right? So Aaron, when he made it, look at every year. Did Aaron? I'm not sure. I remember. Good story. Aaron's one of my best friends in the game. Wrote the forward to my first book. When they played Montreal, when he was with Philly, and they played him in 2009 or 10 around there in the playoffs, Aaron flew me up, gave me tickets to the game, and I remember. I think Simone Gagne got injured. So Aaron was a fourth liner in the NHL. Could fight and often did, but if someone got hurt on the first line, Aaron wasn't going to embarrass him. He'd go in there and be able to play. So that was the other thing. I just figured I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. They know how good I am. And if it ends up swaying in the side of that, I fight a little bit more like Chris Neal, but I get a regular shift. I never thought of myself that I was going to be, I never thought that I was going to end up getting one shift a game to fight. That was the end of that. I did not think that was going to happen, but Chris Neal for sure. I could see that start, and that was starting to happen. Did I fight too much? Maybe 34 in 1 year as a rookie is a little much, especially when underlying all this, you're right, is a 50-goal scorer in his draft year. And it's not like that was a one-off. I went to Red Deer, like I said, 33 and 30 out gate. So, lead my team. There was enough evidence that I could score. But as time went on, and I did see, guys, it's the NHL. So I'm not saying I was going to be the next Cam Neely either. I don't really know. I just mean I felt comfortable out there. I definitely think I could have played on the fourth line, but if it came to it, if I was a little more Chris Neal than Rick Nash, wouldn't bother me. And I could see that happening. My goal was to, never have to drop my gloves unless I was pissed off. When I left, it was because I was a scorer. Right? If I could be Austin Matthews, then I wanted to be Austin Matthews. But if I had to be Wayne Simmons, no problemo. Bring it on. Just put me on an NHL team, please.
Now, I got a question that a couple of the guys that played senior with and against you mentioned to me in passing this week when I told them you were coming. They mentioned something about you being a stand-up comic. They said you got a couple stories on that one.
I'm not really, although I've done it. My first book came out, Tales of a First Round Nothing. I should mention, because I know I'm afraid. I get my new book, by the way, that a lot of this fighting stuff is actually explained in. It's called Fights, Film, and Folklore. Tales with TR, Fights, Film, and Folklore. Look me up on Instagram, Terry Ryan 2020. If you want a copy, shoot me a DM. I'll personalize one, send it out. Now, that being said, my first book is called Tales of a First Round Nothing, and that really took off. I had Bob McCowan had me on immediately. I was talking about senior hockey. I happened to be at the Allen Cup with the week it dropped, playing for Newfoundland. We got in the final against Dundas. Jay McKee played. Matthew Barnaby was on the team. It was in Dundas. They beat us in double overtime. But I was up there. My book was coming out, so I stayed for a week. I went on Bob McCowan. Ken Reed had me in the studio. I just went on this coincidental, because I was there, serendipitous, I guess is the word, tour of the kind of media blitz tour that I didn't even really plan. My book had just come out, and Ron McLean was up there and said, "Hey, do you want to drop into Hockey Night in Canada studios?" I literally walked in with my book. They threw it on, him and Don. I'm talking with them. Great. It was an absolutely great week. Then I come home though, and I'm working when I often, I work in the movies, right? But if you see me on screen, that's like a day or two. Normally I'm crew, right? So I do background, I do stunts, I do acting. Per day you get paid as an actor. So they want to get if you're in an episode, say it takes me, I was in an episode of Hudson and Rex recently, the show that we film here. So the episode takes a week to film, but they're not going to have me in every day. They don't do it in order. They'll have my scenes one day, right? That's the way that works. They'll just do them all in a row. They shoot out of order. So I'm not, when I say that all the time, people think I'm out there as this actor that's freelancing all over the world. No, we had a couple of studios here. I go to Toronto here and there. But, if I'm in 5 things in a year and it looks like I'm busy, that could be 5 days. I'm normally working on the crew. I'm a set dresser. I'm a production assistant, any number of things. So that particular day, Jason Momoa, I was working with him. We were doing Frontier, and I was a set dresser. So we had to move all these trees. We had to make this scene that required more trees. So rather than change location, we all went down and chopped down these evergreen trees, brought them in, put them on set, made it look like we were somewhere that we weren't. And that can be fun. So I had a fun day, but then my phone rings. I got tree sap all over me. I'm dirty. And all these actual actors are around, including Momoa. And it's Jerry D. And Jerry D, and those who don't know what I'm talking about, just look it up.
Yep.
Maybe he's a comedian in Canada, pretty big one. He's got the show, Mr. D. He's a host of Family Feud. Anyway, he'd call me, and anyway, we were talking. He said, I'm so busy, I don't read much, but I read this book. He said, I love it. I wonder if we can get writing something. He wanted to write a hockey show, as I recall, some kind of hockey show. And we started to do it. So anyway, I said, I'll come up to Toronto if you want to meet or whatever. So anyway, the long and short of it is that he convinced me to do stand-up. But at first, when I was talking to him, I didn't realize that was going to be the deal. I went up there thinking that we were going to write something and I might try stand-up comedy. So I was in Toronto maybe 3 days, and he said, well, down at Yuck Yucks on Richmond, I made a call and I got in there tonight. It was open mic night, but you got to, it's just not anybody can get there. You got to be on some sort of list or like have done something. And I never did anything. I'd never done anything. I did have some friends driving through. Zach O'Brien is my buddy from Newfoundland. He plays pro over in Europe now. He was playing for the Chicago Wolves that year, and they just won it. Or maybe Manchester, whatever it was, they just won it. The American League Championship, and they were driving back. Teddy Purcell got wind of all this. My buddy, 8 or 9 year NHL vet. He was out in California, but he had some buddies within Tampa in the area, and they came to the show. Some friends I was with, Taran, Sam with, and I just put a tweet out there, I might do this. So that Yuck Yucks ended up being packed, and I didn't really know what to do. I had no idea. And Jerry just said, in other words, I advertised it before I had an act, and I didn't have an act. And I sat at home thinking, like, what's the deal with referees? And I was going nowhere with it. And I just phoned Jerry. I said, I don't know what you want me to do. He said, you're going to try to write an act for tomorrow. He said, Jesus, man. He said, you're not going to do that. Trust me. A little bit presumptuous of me to do that. So he said, just tell one of the stories out of the book. So to be honest, I got up there on stage and I said, I opened with, I didn't know what to say to people. I just said, look, I never thought I'd ever be in this position. But I said, I'm the biggest sports disappointment in the history of Newfoundland and Labrador. I just going through a divorce, and I'm not really a stand-up comedian. So please bear with me. And everybody kind of threw me a bone. And then I told a couple of stories, and I had the crowd with me, and I couldn't believe it happened. But the thing is, after that, I never thought I'd do it again. I thought he was just it was a bucket list thing, and I thought he was helping me out. So the next day I phoned and I said, if you want to get writing something, Jerry, where are we going to meet? And, you got to find me a job. And he says, well, why don't you open for me tonight? He actually told me to meet him in Oshawa. I didn't really know why, although I could sniff something was up. He was playing the biggest venue he'd ever played. He was going on a Canadian tour. He'd never done it of stadiums. So he was like big, kind of major junior type places. So he was starting in Oshawa. I forget what's called, the GM Center maybe. And he said, meet me out here. This was the next morning while I'm having breakfast. I got on the GO train, went out. I said, I'm here, and opened the door. He said, I'm not there yet. I went in and I looked around, guys. I'm telling you, like 5,000 or 6,000 seats. And I couldn't believe it. I was looking at it going, like, how did I find myself in this situation? I'm not a stand-up comedian. I've never really done it other than last night. And before I got up on stage, I had like 5 or 6 shooters. My nerves were gone. And not only that, I smoked a bit of weed, and I always forget when. So like, I didn't even remember what I said. And he was like, I remembered the story, but the delivery, everything, I have no idea. Jerry was just like, man, you should take record every, and maybe you're a stand-up comedian, Jerry. I'm not. I don't know what to do. So I just got up. I'm telling you guys, it was more people there than not. I'm guessing about 4,500 people. And it looked packed though, because they just moved the stage out a little bit. So it's not like there was empty seats at all. It was just like this big, big room. And I didn't know what to do. So I opened the same way. And I gave people a choice, as I recall. I said, do you want to hear this story, or this story? And then a few people had read my book, luckily, in the crowd. And that area is one, there's a lot of Newfoundlanders, Ajax, Pickering, around there. There's a lot of Newfoundlanders. So there's a lot that came. A lot already knew who I was. And I was just say, hey, who wants to hear the Taidomi story? Or do you want to hear the hot sauce story? All those. And so I knocked my teeth out of my head with a hammer. On purpose. So anyway, they all picked one, and then I told another one. And then, one Habs was going like, go Habs go, and then it was go Leafs go. It was a great atmosphere. I was so nervous, but I ended up getting up there for about a half hour. Jerry's like, what? So it's like, it was a weird thing. The first time I actually was like advertised as a stand-up comedian. I did this room that I'll never do again. I talked to comedians since. Mark Critch, this hour is 22 minutes. We did a charity thing recently, and he said, I've never done a room like that. I can't. And he's one of the best I've ever met. I don't care, Canadian, American, anything. He's one of the funniest people. He just doesn't, live in the States and do it because he doesn't want to. He is a fantastic comedian and guy, but I couldn't believe it. Then it started to hit home. He's like, think about it. Like, what comedians do you know? Look on TV, look at these specials. Louis C.K. was big at the time, a few more. He's like, they're playing in auditoriums or arts and culture center type things. I'm like, yeah. He's like, not a lot of comedians get to play that kind of a room. So it's a weird situation because it makes me real nervous. That summer, Jerry's like, he's like, he wanted me to practice. So he's like, you got to get out and do the comedy bar and stuff. And, I did it. It was like $50, if that, per time. It wasn't worth for all the anxiety, and a lot is expected. And, in these little rooms, I found the big rooms easier because if one person laughs, it's like contagious. So at least you hear something. Like that night, if a joke didn't work and only 1,000 people of the 4,500 people laughed, I would still hear a murmur. If there's 11 people at Yuck Yucks because there's a storm out, which happened, right? And is anybody into hockey, crickets? Then I'm a one-trick pony. It's going nowhere. What are you going to care about how scary it was to fight Ty Domi? You never heard of him before, right? So that, and there were nights like that. So what ended up happening, guys, is that Dale Howard-Chuck, rest in peace, what a great guy, passed away last August. Dale and I had done like alumni events together and stuff, and he knew a lot of people that I knew. I didn't play a long time, but I made some great connections. Ally Frady, Shane Corson, people like that are really close to me, and Darcy Tucker, and they were friends of his. So he said, we don't have a whole lot of people that were one of us that played. I remember saying, I was never, ever one of you. He'd have these golf tournaments in Muskoka for these Hall of Fame guys. I was like, I was never one of you. But all good. But he'd have like guys like Ken Reed's a good friend. So like he just said, I'll pay you decent money, which he did, to come out here and do that act at my golf tournament. So it was great. He paid for everything. I went out there. I was treated like royalty for 3 days. I stayed with PJ Stock, who's a friend of mine from pro hockey. And I got to get up and speak to like Grant Fuhr and like Peter Mahavlich, and it was crazy. It was just nuts. We were in Muskoka, and Ken Reed wrote the foreword to my second book. Sportsnet Ken. We went up there together. I remember we got a car together up, and I went on first. He went on second, and then he did the auction. And I had a few beers with Brian Scrudland, and who I'd never met that I really looked up to, and it just was a perfect night. So from there, Dale set me up with a few more gigs of like public speaking events, and the NHL alumni stepped in and helped me out here and there, and that became a thing. So I did again this summer, saying PEI. Can't really travel much, obviously, so this was a bad year for that ball to start rolling, because it really started rolling like last year. But yeah, so I do stand up. To answer your original question 3 hours ago, but it's more. I'm doing the same act when I public speak. I'm only telling a story, right? So I'm giving the same performance in the back of a bus on the way to a senior hockey game, as I am on stage at Yuck Yucks, as I am at Dale's event. So I guess word got out there. So I do like a lot of golf tournaments, like kids, and I can talk about a lot of things. There's a lot of stories in there. Not all of them or have punchlines like, a transvestite, or knocking my teeth out of my head with a hammer, or hot sauce. Those are those are stories that happen to a guy along the way. Some are funny, some aren't, some are sad. But I'd like to think that, if there's one message that comes through in both books, is that, the dressing room is a microcosm for real life. The attributes that it takes to be successful inside that dressing room are the attributes that makes it to be, helps you be successful in real life. I don't know where Vincent Damphousse is right now. I assume he's a professional guy, treated as a professional with a lot of respect, because that's the way he was in the dressing room. I could name people that I assume that isn't the case. Most of them don't make it to the NHL though, because talking about Habs Unfiltered there. How about that? Unfiltered.
Yeah.
You're usually, juniors where you find a lot of the unfiltered. By the time you get to the NHL, let alone the Montreal Canadiens, if they got wind that that's why I couldn't believe Michel Therrien was there so long, to be honest. But outside of that, you get up there, and even the guys you don't hear from much, there's a reason they're there. They're gone if they're not. It's a, I don't want to comment on the politics of it, but that kid on New York Rangers right now, Tony, is it D'Angelo?
Yeah.
He, clearly a good hockey player, but something, he's not good with teammates. And it's not just the politics of it. This guy can't be in a room with other people, it seems. So, although I bet you he played all his games in junior or college or wherever he played, right? Because it's a filtered thing. So I just, and I was lucky enough to get up to the top. If I didn't get there for any amount of time, again, it's the 8 games, but I was there in the summers, and, I was called up a lot and I didn't play. That year I was there just practicing. I have a real good idea what goes on. And, I was part of that process for 3 or 4 years. So I'm glad I got to see it, because even guys like Turner Stevenson that you don't really, oh yeah, he won a Stanley Cup. Of course he did. I'm not putting Turner Stevenson down when I say that he wasn't much above average. It's not like he was going to break scoring records, but he was real good, reliable player, who ended up with a Stanley Cup. He's a real good, reliable player on the best team in the league, whose teammates liked him and who listened to the coach. And if you listen to the coach, that's another reason it kills me, because I was always a coach's player. I just didn't like Michel Therrien, but I was so excited to learn from NHL coaches. I did for a bit, but that professionalism and that whole part of what makes you be successful as a hockey player and a professional and off the ice. And you're always working with charities. In the Habs, we had to pick a charity, but again, you're a professional by them, but they taught you to work with people that were less fortunate, that were disadvantaged. I carry that here. I do it all the time. It's junior, it just seemed like lip service. But I got to be honest, when I got to the NHL and I even saw the Montreal Canadiens were doing that, I mean, look at PK Subban, rubbed off on him clearly, being in that dressing room. So anyway, I know I'm rambling on, but that would be the main thing I want people to take out of the book. There's funny stories along the way. The Canadiens had, it's all a metaphor. The Canadiens had, remember that pregame brawl they had in warm-up? The refs weren't even on the. There's always hiccups, right? But they're the most successful team ever. The point of my book along the way getting there, if I didn't tell all the downs and ups and everything that goes on in the game, I don't think I'd be being true to myself or the people that wanted to read the book. Not every single account of my life is in these books. Okay, but I wanted to highlight the important things that I thought maybe a hockey fan and just someone that I wanted to balance. The hockey's one thing, but in Montreal especially, there's so many things that are important off the ice, and the journey that you take is only partially on the ice. That's just what everybody sees. The other stuff isn't. What got you there is something differently. All these players that are these great stars that got there, they got there somehow, and they all have backstories, right? For every Pierre Turgeon I played with, there was a Jonas Höglund from Västerås, Sweden, that never thought he would make it, that drove an hour and a half to the rink every day. And it's all so interesting. And, along that way, there's just so many people you meet and so many stories to be told that I feel extremely fortunate for that. And that, not that you asked, but that has been the theme of my books and my post Canadiens life.
Well, everything has been very positive coming out of you in your books, online, all the stuff you do around the community. So it's not a surprise for me. I mean, just we ran into each other once. You don't remember it, but I was coming out of Greensleeves and falling down. You even picked me up. So
When,
even
Blaine,
then,
when
you
was
did.
that?
Oh, this was about 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
2 years ago. Did you tell me about the podcast?
No, no, I
Wow.
was unable to say much of anything.
Wow. And so, well, I'm glad. I don't remember. I probably would, if you were to fill in the gaps of that story, but that's all
I have a
too
hard time
familiar.
filling in the
It's
gaps of
all
that
too
night.
familiar. Yeah, me foggy brained coming out of Greensleeves wouldn't be a surprise. And
There's not a night on George Street we can actually fill in the blanks for most stories. I don't think.
where are you
so.
guys from originally? Halifax?
I'm from Halifax. Yes.
Okay.
I
Blaine,
grew up in Northern Ontario,
what part?
Sudbury.
Oh, okay. I was there last year. We shot Letterkenny there.
Yeah, it's a great. I watched that episode. That was
About
hilarious.
a year and a half ago. That last year wouldn't make sense. Yeah, year and a half ago. And I got lots of friends from there. Actually, I have a guest coming on my podcast in 3 weeks, Jeff Circa. Jeff
Okay.
Circa, Sirkka.
Yep.
He's a cop now in Denver. Real old school. Jeff likes his beer full-bodied, and his favorite movies 1 through 5 all feature John Wayne. His favorite music is Frank Sinatra. There's old school and there's Cirque. Cirque has a great story about he never got to the NHL, but he got to warm up. So anyway, it's a really unique story. If you're from Sudbury, either listen to my next 2 weeks from now, I'll have him on, or have him on yourself. It's very interesting.
Now, before you take off on us, I just wanted to ask: do you feel like everything that you did kind of paved the way for this new generation of Newfoundlanders that's finally being appreciated and seen by the NHL community?
I think it started with John Slaney and that goal in '91, and when John went 9th overall, but the ball didn't move. 4 or 5 years went by, and you would think that would, but I think that would open the door. But I think people just thought it was a one-off. I won't say me. I would definitely say my father. When my father said, "It's not Terry, take that all-star team," and we went with this team Newfoundland to Vancouver, and we're hanging in there. And all of a sudden, there was nobody playing. The odd person might have been born, or the year before there might have been someone in the CIS. I'm just telling you, at the time, I remember when I went, there was no one playing major junior. One guy, Gordy Walsh, but he was just moving on. John Drover played a few games. You could count on one hand the guys and people went to the OHL for the most part. Once every 2 or 3 years, we had one player go to the OHL. That's what it was like. Okay. When that team went, and all of a sudden, immediately, 8 or 9 guys start playing on the mainland, right? On the mainland, just anywhere. So then, and another reason, not only that tournament, guys, but I swear to God, when I went out to Quesnel, I remember Mike Barnett. I didn't know this was going to happen. Mike Barnett was Wayne Gretzky's agent, and he came right to my door, and he said, "I just signed Radek Bank." He said, "If I sign you, you'll be the youngest kid I've ever signed." But he said, "I just watched a junior A game, and I watched a 14-year-old play and dominate it." And he goes, "I want to sign you right now." Now, I swear to you, I might be off by a word or two. That happened. He came right to my door and he said those things in Quesnel, BC. And the first thing my dad said, "If you think Terry's good, go to Harbor Grace, Newfoundland, and check out Dan Cleary." And I didn't take slight to that. I was like, "Oh yeah, Mike," because I was proud of being from Newfoundland. I was like, and Harold Druken was the next. A couple days later, he's like, "You got to look at this guy." And a lot of fans, hockey fans, you had to really dig, but Druken played 125 games, and he Vancouver one year, if you're a Vancouver fan, he tied it up. They needed to get in the playoffs with a win. He tied it up with 10 seconds left in the game, and then he fucking won, or he won it in overtime. Hal Druken only played 125 games only, but big name in Vancouver hockey. And, so so for those reasons, and when that happened, people are looking at it going, okay, so no one comes from Newfoundland, yet Slaney goes 9th overall, Ryan goes 8th, Cleary goes 13th, and Druken goes 30th. It all within so I mean, what happened in my mind, what blew the doors off it was people thought these were one-offs, but finally in the late 90s, people started to go, you know what? What about everywhere else has third liners? There's got to be a middle ground with these guys. Hello, Ryan Clough, Luke Adam Party, Mike Ryder. Not that these guys, Mike Ryder, I would, I'm pretty confident I could never go on and have a scoring career like that guy. I'm not saying I'm better than Mike Ryder. What I'm saying, minor hockey, I was a bigger name. I was younger. I was 6 foot in Pee Wee, so it was obvious. The players I mentioned with Druken and all that, it was impossible to miss them. But who else is skating around? These guys are coming from somewhere, It was only you would get a Newfoundlander and he would be your captain of the first line. But it was there must be players there that can fill in other roles. And there were. And now, every year, we in the Quebec League draft alone, we have multiple players per year, often 10, 12 of them, and then there's guys, Alex Newhook chose to go Junior A, the Boston College, ends up on the World Junior team. This year we had 2 players on the World Junior team, Dawson Mercer and Alex Newhook. And whereas the difference would be back then, it would be those only 2 of those players getting a sniff. Well, there was other players from here that had a chance. There's probably 30 playing major junior. There's all kinds in CIS. There's multiple players overseas. So hockey, and we have there's 500,000 people in Newfoundland. I don't know what the hockey registration is, but per capita, that's part of a borough in Toronto, right? That's not even Queen West, Toronto, right? You're talking in the whole province, and you're including bays, all kinds of places that don't have skates, don't have ice. So, the majority of our players come from a bigger area. Then you got the biggest is St. John's. Michael Ryder comes from Bonavista. I guarantee you that, and so does Adam Party. Both NHLers, both 100% would have been overlooked at the time. Even now, they added in our AAA system here. It was obvious out west, like Cornerbrook. Then they had a Central. They had East when it started. When it started, they had 1 team. Then that happened. Well, then they added. I think it's called Tripen, the Trinity Placentia area, and that's Michael Ryder. If that didn't happen, I'm telling you, he wouldn't have gone anywhere. It's an evolution, and those guys now, obviously. I'm giving more credit to my dad here. You asked me a question, Ray.
No. I mean, your dad did do a lot of work, and
as I explained it sounds cocky, but my dad played pro in the 70s. There was 5 Newfoundlanders. In the 80s, I don't think there was one that played in the NHL. So it's just that the river was dry for a little bit. But now, because of those players, I mean, Michael Ryder and Stanley Cleary won a Stanley Cup. What my dad did, I think, was get people noticed who are already playing. The extension of that is that I think with Cleary and Ryder in particular, and with Ryan Clough having a 600-game career and so on, and Luke Adam and Adam Purdy and so on and so on. I think what those guys did is get people actually involved in playing that weren't going to play. It's like Carl English came here. He's one of the best basketball players. That we didn't have basketball. Then they have this National Basketball League here. It's the minors. It's the minors of the minors. But we sell out in mile 1 because Carl English is playing. My daughter didn't pick up a basketball in her life. So she saw St. John's Edge game, and Carl English is what? He's from Newfoundland? That's what I think Ryder and Cleary did. I think, there was people that just weren't playing hockey that said, what? You can win a Stanley Cup? The parade here was massive. I swear half the province was out. So I think they inspired people to play. I merely helped steer the boat in the right direction.
Treg, did you have anything else?
Well, no, my computer crapped out on me, so I missed a lot, but
I got to take off too, but I will. Boys, if you want to do this again anytime, I really will. I seem hard to track down, it's more the timing since my book came out a few months ago. That's been chaos.
Oh, understandable. Plus, you got you're involved a lot with the TV shows and doing.
My daughter now. I got books. I got, you know, I do some charity work here. I do manage a bar, TJ's Pub. And then, you know, little things online. With the books, my books are in stores, right? But it's when I say this, it's no slight against the book company. They treat me great, but it's standard book deal that most people have. You know, if the book sells at Chapters or somewhere like, well, in a bookstore, it doesn't have to be Chapters. Why am I giving them free advertising? If my book sells in a bookstore, it's $20, right? I get 50 cents. I wrote it all myself. I provided the pictures. It's just the cost of it. That's the way. So the way to make money at it, I literally buy it at Costco, buy my book at Costco, like 50 at a time. Then I come back here. And if people want on the mainland, whatever, if they want it, I'll just charge 10 extra bucks. So I buy it, I think it comes out to like 15 bucks, and then I sell it for 25. So I make close to 10 bucks a book. And people get, you know, a sign, and I got pictures made and everything. So I put in a picture, a hockey card, and the book, I figured $25 is a good value nowadays. And that way I at least make $10 a book. So that's why I'm often busy, because I got to get these out on time and people order them. I've never really been in that position. And, you know, I want to get it out to them. They're nice enough to buy it off me when they could just walk down to the store and buy it for cheaper. Then I'd like to get it out immediately. But, you know, that's a process, because you get, you know, you take their info and all that, and you know, they have the trust that I'm going to get it out there to them. And, you know, there's almost a relationship with every book. So, you know, I've sold, you know, I don't want to say how many, but the sales have been going well. Not in the least due to great shows that like yourselves that, you know, it's one thing to speak to a crowd. It's another thing to speak to a Montreal Canadiens crowd, right? I've noticed Habs fans all over the world, just awesome. Like a lot of them, for years, guys, I felt like, you know, like unworthy as a Canadian almost. You know, as you get older, that's silly. But, you know, when I was younger, you kind of see where I was coming from. But the Habs are such a juggernaut in the sporting world that I could be like, and I've either had my book or, you know, walking through an airport in Prague, or you know, I'm often for ball hockey over in Europe. And, you know, people just so welcoming. It's one thing, A, they think you're Canadian, which is much better than American. And B, you know, places like that, they're really big into hockey. So like they might love Jaromir Jagr personally, but like they love the Montreal Canadiens, and they know about Guy Lafleur and Jean Beliveau and so on and so on. And it's wild. Like, and they're all over the world, where I don't know that I'd quite be able to say that yet about like a Columbus Blue Jackets fan. No slight to them, or Nashville Predators. They're just too like, there's people that their great grandfathers were into the Habs and they live in Germany. Like, you know, it's nuts how far back and how many political spectrums the Montreal Canadiens, the umbrella, you know, how far they overlap. It transcends hockey. And for that reason as well, I'm so pumped to have played for them, because it's a conversation piece wherever you go. Remember, me and Jason Momoa were in a castle on a sheep farm, for lack of a better way to put it, in southern Scotland, like northern England. There's out in the middle of nowhere, where we were shooting Frontier, and we had to get these castles, and it's much easier to work in them when there's not in the middle of a community and there's people, you know, coming and going. Anyway, we were just out there, and this dude, he collected things from all over the world. Like, the castle was rare enough. I think it was dated 1200, but it was, he had, say, the bed in there was a bed that Mick Jagger owned with Marianne Faithfull. And then he had a Rolling Stones, he had all original like albums, he had Keith Richards guitar. And then there was a woolly mammoth husks, like really weird stuff all over the place, all like extravagant and in your face, but just any, you know, the castle was awesome to shoot in. But anyway, we go down, and he's, I mean, at this point, I'm also playing background on the show. So I got my beard is like months old. I'm wearing a British red coat, because Momoa's at any point, it's stormy and we're waiting for the snow. So I'm also his personal assistant. So like we're waiting for the snow to come for this scene, and he's like, I'm assistant, but I got my stuff on just in case I got to do a scene. It's this weird place that I've never really been in the film world. I'm only there. Anyway, this dude takes down, and does he not lift up this tickle trunk, and he's got a Maurice Richard stick. And he said, I don't know if you guys are American. I don't know if you've ever heard of hockey. I'm like, oh, whoa. So then I'm like, are you kidding me? We bring him on the phone. I showed him. The guy nearly fell down. He couldn't believe it. This was an old timer, a sheep farmer kind of guy. He had all kinds of money, but it was all in this castle. When I said extravagant, it was his assets. The guy was just a down-to-earth, everyday dude. Outside, it was sheep and just farmland for miles, right? Little cottages. That was it. Anyway, I said, if I can get this conversation going. Anyway, Buddy had been to Montreal Forum. He'd seen all kinds of games when he was younger. And so those were his favorite players. And anyway, I was blown away. Point being, I don't know if anybody's doing that and hauling out a Cam Ward jersey from Carolina Hurricanes or whatever it might be. It's great accomplishments of those guys and everything. I'm not putting it down. They're an NHL team with great fans. The Montreal Canadiens symbol is almost like the bat symbol. Like, it's just like, just put it up there, and Habs fans worldwide, that guy didn't give a shit that I only played 8 games. He couldn't believe I played a minute. Like, it was just great. So we had an awesome time, and that pretty much is just an example of how many. That's happened to me thousands of times in my life. It'll happen this week.
That's amazing. I want to thank you for coming on, and we definitely want to have you back. And I'll text you. I'll text you a little bit later. I got some ideas that we could get some of these books out to some of our listeners as well. So
Sure.
I'd love to text back and forth on that and get that set up.
Okay, thanks, guys. That's I really appreciate it. I got to take off now too. I can't believe over an hour has gone by. Okay, I appreciate that. I guess I should mention on Twitter, I'm Terry Ryan 20. And on Instagram, yeah, Terry Ryan 2020. It's Tales with TR, Fights, Film, and Folklore. Just shoot me a message if you want a personalized copy.
Right on. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Terry. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you guys for coming to George Street. If it happens again, let me know. This is all going to be over soon. Doesn't feel like it, but science tells me it is, and facts. It'll be over soon. I hope to see you guys here again. If you ever need me, just say the word.
Will do.
Will do. Thanks, Terry.
Thanks.
Hey, guys.
So that was Terry Ryan, who joined us. I want to thank all our listeners for sticking by and listening to Tales with Terry. That was amazing. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Just, you could just listen to him talk. Habs Unfiltered, just Terry Ryan.
Oh, he's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He is a true character. And I honestly feel like he's essentially what Newfoundland is bottled up into a person.
Oh, it's perfect. Down to earth. It's one of the best interviews we had. And I don't think we really did much interviewing. It was just,
we asked him like 3 or 4 questions.
Yeah. And
he ran with it.
Yeah.
So that was amazing. So thanks for listening, everyone. We really do appreciate you sticking by us, and we hope to bring you more great content like this. So keep clicking like, keep listening, and remember, if you are talking about it, so are we.